looking to see who the guest speaker was, and I noticed that it hadn't had anybody filled in the slot, so I got on the phone trying to call around. I called Franklin Graham, and he said he'd love to come. He said he knew this would be a great opportunity, but he just said he had too much on his calendar, and I said I can understand that, and so I started trying to call. I even went down the list. I called Mike Atchison because I know he could sing for us, but they're a little short-handed at Minuteman, so he wasn't able to come. And my wife said, whatever you do, don't volunteer to sing to the group because you want to hold them together. And so I was trying my best to find somebody, and out of Slapout, Alabama, I got in contact with Cletus Lovejoy, and he said he had a busy schedule, but he was going to try his best to come in and share with y'all a little bit this morning to try to cheer us up a little bit. So if we can locate Cletus somewhere in the halls, we will bring him in, and it'll be live from 205.
Well, how you doing, folks? I'd like to say that, introduce myself, and I will, because I realize there's always somebody in the crowd who might not know who I am. But I'd like to know right off the bat, how many of y'all were involved in the senior adult VBS that we just had a few weeks ago? Raise your hand. Okay, there's still a bunch of you that weren't there. How many of you have been involved in it at all over the last few years since we started that? Still, some of you haven't done it. Well, I'm not going to apologize for those of you who served in VBS, but some of this stuff you're going to have heard before, so you're going to have to forgive me there. But I notice y'all laugh a lot at Brother Mike's jokes, and I've heard some of those a whole bunch of times. I think we're going to be all right today. Well, first let me just say I'm glad that I got this opportunity to be here. It was kind of a spur of the moment thing, and but there's no place I'd rather be. And you know, I come from a good family, and I want to talk about that a little bit later. But the Lovejoys are good, just a good family, and we got a good family name. And most of you already know Goober. Goober's been involved here a long time, doing your children's VBS. And so he wanted me to say, give a shout out to you guys and Miss Ginger for allowing him to do it. And because that he's got to be involved, then I ultimately got to get involved with you good folks. And Brother Ed has allowed me to be a part of y'all's senior adult VBS, and I really do appreciate that. But I just want y'all to know that before I came over here this morning, I was over at one of our retirement homes. I like to go out and visit those every now and then, and I just was listening to some of those senior adults that were sitting around the table. See, they had just finished breakfast and they were having their morning coffee, and this is pretty much how their conversation went as I heard it. As they sat there, one lady said, "I can barely pick up my cup of coffee because I was just so weak." And so then this man said, "Well, my cataracts are so bad I can't even see my cup of coffee." And somebody else said, "Well, my arthritis is so bad in my neck I can barely even turn my neck." And this other lady says, "Well, you know, my blood pressure pills are making me awful nervous." And so this one lady, she just said, "You know, well, that's the price we pay for getting older." And they all kind of got quiet. You could have heard a pin drop, and I think they were just all commiserating there together. But then that lady brightened up, and she said, "Let's thank God we can all still drive." That much reminds me of these two little old ladies that were riding down the road one day. They were riding what I call, they don't make these anymore, I call them land yachts. I mean, you couldn't afford to drive, though. You had one, didn't you? But they're the big old gas guzzling cars, even gas guzzling back when you could afford gas. And they built like tanks, big things. And these were two little bitty little old ladies. And so they're going down the road, and I promise you, if you were to see them, the car coming, they were so little and the car so big, you'd think there was nobody in the car. And so here they are driving down the road. Well, the lady in the passenger side just happened to look up, and she said, "Why, I must be losing it. It looked like we just ran through a red light." So she said, "I need to pay more attention." And so sure enough, the next light they came to was red. They barreled right on through that one. Before she could say anything, they came to a third red light, and they went right through that one. She looked over at the driver, and she said, "Mildred, you just ran through 3 red lights." Mildred says, "Am I driving?" I got a good friend of mine who's a preacher. He's one of these modern type guys. You know, he's always trying stuff out. He wants to be innovative and, you know, reach everybody in the congregation. And so he's always trying to, you know, do things new. And one of the things he came up with, and I thought it wasn't a bad idea, and it was one way to just kind of bring worship together, but also preach a message. And what he was going to do, he had his congregation, and he instructed them pretty much like I just told you. And he said, "What I'm going to do is give you one word. Just one word, and that should remind you of a hymn. Now, when you think of that hymn, I want you all to stand up and sing a verse of that hymn. And we'll just keep doing that right on through, and we will actually preach a message this morning, and you'll get to be a part of that. You will actively be able to be a part of the sermon. And as we also worship together." But they was looking at each other going, "Yeah, what are you talking about?" So the first word that he said cross. Well, everybody looked at each other, and he just stood there and did the same thing. So finally 2 or 3 people stood up, and they started singing "Old Rugged Cross." So everybody else stood up with them, and they just started singing that. So they sat back down, and then the preacher looked at him. He said, "Grace." All of a sudden, more people stood up, and they started singing "Amazing Grace," and they had a little bit more gusto, and were singing more, and then they started getting the hang of this thing. And so they kept doing that, and then they sit back down, and then the preacher said, "Power." And now they all stood up, right in unison, singing "Power in the Blood." And I mean, they was a-going, and they was just in jaw. Wow, you couldn't. And the next thing that preacher did, they sat down, he looked at them, he said, "Sex." Well, you could have heard a pin drop. Nobody said anything. Nobody moved. Finally, way back in the back of the church, a little 92-year-old lady stood up and started singing "Precious Memories." I can tell you don't work vacation dollars. You know, there's all this stuff going on with healthcare today, and I know you all know it's right there in the front page of the paper. They're basically shutting down the government over all this. Everybody's questioning, what is our healthcare going to look like? And so everybody's saying this can't be good. But I want y'all to know, in the midst of all of this stuff that they're talking about, there's finally one thing that looks like the government is going to get right. And here's what it is. What is going to happen is that they've come up with a shot. You know how right now you go out and get a flu shot, or you can go get a pneumonia shot? Well, forget all that. They got a shot that will take care of any and everything that you could ever think about getting. That's true. And what they're going to do is just have everybody get that shot. And what they'll do is, like, for instance, in a room like this, they bring all of you into the room, and they'd make you all line up around the wall, and then they'd have you turn around, and then they're going to make you drop your drawer, and then they're going to give you this here shot. Yeah. This new government program is called Medicare in Detail. You laugh. didn't think that was funny. So anyway, I kind of go around and like I told you, I was visiting a nursing home. Well, I visited all sorts of folks in all sorts of places. One day, I was out visiting. This is back when Jackson Hospital had a psych unit, and I was out visiting. I won't tell you who it was, but I was there visiting somebody, and I told them who I was and who I wanted to see, and then they had to go get them and bring them out there to see me. And while I was waiting on this person to come out, I noticed there was this here man, and he was standing up to the wall, and he had his ear pressed to the wall like this. And he was just standing there like that. Well, I stood over there for a while, and I was watching him, and he didn't move. He just kept, I went up to him. I said, "Sir, what you listening to?" "Shh, shh." And then he just kept pressing his ear up there. And I said, "Really? Well, I mean, I don't hear shh, shh." So I did the only thing that you would do. I went up and I put my ear to the wall. I did that for a few minutes. I said, "Mister, I don't hear a thing." He said, "Been like that all day." One day I was walking down the hall of the church with one of the deacons, and we got this big old metal divider dividing. I noticed y'all got one of those too. If you don't watch where you're going, you would run right into it. You got to watch where you're going when you're walking around. But it's just like a metal post right there, and I wasn't paying no attention. He wasn't paying no attention. We just engaged in conversation, and as we're walking, I walked slap dab into that pole. I mean, just as soon as I turned around, bam, there it was. Big old knot on my head. They said, he said to some of the other church folk, and I said, "Cletus, you need to go to the doctor and get that checked out." I said, no, I'm all right. It's just a bump on the head. But they finally convinced me that the best thing for me to do was go get it checked out. So while I went to the doctor, I went into that waiting room, and I went up to the receptionist, and I told her, I said, I just got a bump on my head, but I need to see the doctor, I guess. So she said, "Well, come with me." And so she took me around to an examination room. And she said, "Mr. Lovejoy, I want you to go into that there room. And I want you to take all your clothes off. And there, I want you to just sit there and you wait, and the doctor will be in there just as soon as he can." I said, "Take my clothes off? I just got a bump on my head." She said, "Mr. Lovejoy, just do what I tell you to do." So I said, "Okay." So I went in that examination room. Well, I got in that there room, and it was real dark in there. I couldn't really see that well. And the first thing I noticed about that room was it was the coldest room I've ever been in. I mean, it was freezing. And here I was taking all my clothes off. Well, I'm sitting there, and no clothes, and freezing. I thought I was in there by myself, but I looked over, and I noticed there was somebody else in the room with me. It was a man in a blue suit. Well, at least I thought it was a blue suit. It turns out he didn't have no clothes on either. Well, and that's an awkward situation if you've ever been into something like that. You want to say something, you just don't know what to say. You can't say, "Good to see you." You can't say, "How you doing?" because you can see. You know how you. So I just finally said, "Can you believe this? I get a bump on my head, and they send me in here and make me take all my clothes off." He said, "What you complaining about?" "I came to deliver a package." Well, for those of you again who don't know who I am, Cletus Lovejoy. I come from a place you might know, not too far from here, Slap Out, Alabama. And really, if you know where Slap Out is, up near Lake Jordan, is if you go there, well, you ain't exactly where at my house yet. You got, really, I live Slap Out of Slap Out. So if you can just go up into the woods a ways, you might be able to find my place. But that's where I come from, and I've just, really enjoyed coming from that neck of the woods. It's always good to get to come to the big city here. and see the sights and everything. I got to go the other day to what y'all call the Alabama National Fair. I call it Six Flags over Chisholm. But it was thoroughly enjoyed myself. Got in for $1 and a can of beans, I want y'all to know. They looked at those beans when I went in there and they said, these things expired about 10 years ago. But since I didn't have no more with me, they let me in. But anyway, but you know, when I come here, I hear the words a lot of times, redneck. You know, I mean, not just me, but other folk that come from up around where I live. We kind of hear that word attached to us a lot. And you know what? I decided that really is more like a badge of honor, maybe a badge of courage. I kind of wear that with pride. I don't mind being called a redneck. In fact, I look around this room and I think that there might be some other rednecks that might even be here today. So I just want you to know that if in your church that your pastor also doubles as an Elvis impersonator, you might be a redneck. If any of you have ever sat at your breakfast table and you stared at a can of frozen orange juice because it said concentrate, you might be a redneck. If you ever had painted your truck camouflage and then couldn't find it, you might be a redneck. If you have ever hit a deer with your car deliberately, you might be redneck. If you're one of them folks that, well, like me, who that when you go to the family reunion, everybody coming, the furthest you might have to travel is 2 miles. And also, if you go to those same family reunions to pick up girls, you might be redneck. I don't do that, by the way. If your best hunting story begins like this, well, I let down my window real quiet, you might be a redneck. And if most of your stories that you tell begin, you ain't going to believe this, you might be a redneck. I want you to know, if you got more than 3 of these in any room of your house, you might be a redneck. I'm not telling you how many I got, because I'm a redneck. You know, there's also things called, rednecks, and then there's people like you folks that, churchified, churchy rednecks. They're a little bit different from just a regular old redneck, because one thing they do is, well, if you got a 4x4 and you say you want to be buried in it because you ain't never seen a hole that it couldn't get out of, you might be a redneck. If you listen to the Bible story and you hear about the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000, and the only question you got is you want to know were those catfish or bats, you might be a redneck. You might be a Southern Baptist redneck if you thought that John the Baptist started the Southern Baptist Convention. You might be a Southern Baptist redneck if you've ever written an IOU and put it in the offering. You might be a Southern Baptist redneck if you think that Jesus used Welch's grape juice and saltine crackers. Well, I'm just on a roll and I don't know where I am.
That's a redneck.
Oh, I got one that I got to share this one too. If you think the 6 to 10 pounds on the side of a package of Pampers is how much they'll hold, I just love that one. Mainly because, well, never mind. Okay, oh, and one more. You might be a Southern Baptist redneck, and y'all will identify with this one. If you've ever clapped your hands in church, and then you felt guilty all the next week, you might be. Okay, growing up there in Slap Out, I got a bunch of stories when I was growing up. One of those happened to be that when I was little, we loved it. We just got through with the summer period. I know we're into the fall, but I love summer times up in Slap Out. You see, the way it was, some of you identify with this, but during the summertime, school was not in session, but you had to get up early in the morning and do your chores. Now we had to do that. But once we got our chores done and ate our breakfast, we could pretty much go do whatever we wanted to. And as long as we was back in time for supper, Mama was happy. Well, I came from a big family, but one day, me and one of my little brothers, we was out with some friends over at their house. Well, they lived several miles away from where we lived, and we walked over there. We got all caught up. We was playing baseball and in the pasture, which, by the way, is so much fun, when you're using cow patties for bases, and you got to be very careful, though, if you ever slide in one and it's not a drive. But anyway, we got all caught up in playing and having a good time, and it got late, and it got close to supper time, and we realized, hey, we're going to be late for supper. And we was going to catch it if we wasn't on time for supper. So the only way to get home on time was to take the shortcut. And that shortcut meant that we had to cross this big old pasture. And in that pasture was only two things. Right there, smack dab in the middle of that pasture was a giant oak tree. And then the other thing in that pasture was a big old ornery bull. Well, we got across that fence, and we're trying to sneak across that pasture before that bull sees us, and we're about halfway across when that bull spotted us. Well, I ran towards that oak tree, and my little brother's right behind me. Well, I jumped up, and I was able to grab a limb there, and I pulled myself up, and I'm sitting up there in that oak tree, but my little brother, he couldn't get up there. And so he starts running around that big old oak tree, and that there bull's just chasing him. And so finally he discovers there's a hole in that tree, so he ducks into that hole. When that bull, gets there, snorts and all, but he finally gives up. He starts to walk off. And out comes my brother. Well, here comes the bull, and he's chasing him again. They go around the tree, round and around again, and he ducks back in. My brother ducks back into the hole. Well, the bull starts to walk off. Brother comes out. Here we go right again. Well, we're wasting time. My father said, hey, if you stay in that hole, that bull will leave. He says, I want to, but there's a bear in here. I got an uncle who has a drinking problem. He actually had his driver's license revoked, so he can't drive, and then got arrested for public intoxication. So I had to take him down to the courthouse. I took him down to the courthouse, and his name was called. And he went up there and stood before the judge, and the judge looked at him and said, sir, do you know why you're here? He says, no, sir. He says, for drinking. He says, let's get started. I got a cousin who graduated from dental school. He became a dentist. I called him up the other day, and I said, what do I do about these yellow teeth? He said, wear a brown tie. I asked him, I said, hey, I've been thinking about getting a set of dentures. Do you make any of them things? He goes, yeah, I do. I said, well, how much would they cost me? He said, well, I make a pair for about $4,000. Something like that. I said, $4,000? I said, whoa, that's way too much. I can't afford that. I said, don't you got something more affordable than that? He said, well, I'll be honest with you. One time I made a pair for $50. I said, $50? Well, that sounds like something right down my, what I'm looking for. My alley right there. I can afford that. I said, I tell you what. I said, I'd like to talk to the person you made those for. So he said, okay. He gave me his name and address. So I went over to the man's house, and so I rang his doorbell, and he came to the door, and I introduced myself. And so my cousin told me that he made you a pair of dentures for $50. He said, well, yes, you did. I said, well, I'm thinking about getting me a pair too. And I only got one question to ask you. Do those dentures cause you any pain? And he said, well, let me tell it to you like this. He said it was about 6 months ago. I was down off the coast of Florida. See, I'm a scuba diver, and I was down there in about, 100 foot of water. And I was down there, and all of a sudden, up from behind me comes this giant octopus, and he just puts his tentacles around me. And I'm able to look down, and I see I'm only got about a minute of air left. I'm about to run out of air. And then I see this man-eating shark coming right at me. Do you know that's the first time since I ever had these dentures, I didn't feel no pain? Well, growing up there in Slap Out when I got older, and we used to go, we'd date and we'd go sparking and all. And so the girl that ended up being my wife, on our first date, we went out and we ended up there on Lake Jordan, and it was already nighttime, and there was a full moon. It was so beautiful, and the stars were out. It was really a romantic setting. I parked right up there next to the lake, and it was just enjoying that. And she looked over at me, and she said, Cletus, she said, if you was to let the top down on this here car, she says, I might give you a kiss. So the next day, I was there in downtown Slap Out with some of my buddies, and I was telling them about what happened. I said, you know what? I got that there top down in 8.5 minutes. Well, one of my buddies says, well, I got 8.5 minutes. He said, it only takes me about 1.5 minutes to get mine down. I said, yeah, but you got a convertible. I always do a lot of this marriage counseling and stuff, so just to let you know that there's a lot of just marriages out there that are hurting sometimes, and I learned this, that 1 and 2 marriages, they end in divorce. That's the truth, that's a statistic. And the rest of them just fight it out to the bitter end. You see, my wife and I, we got married for better or for worse. I couldn't do no better, she couldn't do no worse. Guys, y'all might be like me. We got this, sometimes we just have a hard time with our wives about going to stuff to do things like shopping and all. We really don't like to go, at least with them. If we got something that we need to get, we know what we want. We go in the store, we go right up to whatever that item is, we pick it up, we go to the cash register, we pay for it, we're in and out of there in just about 5 minutes. But that ain't the way it is with the lady folk. No. The other day I was with my wife. We was at the grocery store. We was back there in the meat section, and it had a sign saying, chickens, 3 pounds. Well, she was picking them up. She had one in each hand. She'd look at it and look at that one, lay it down, pick up another one. And she's just doing this for I don't know how long. And finally, the manager of the meat market comes back there and he said, ma'am, can I help you? She said, yes, sir. Did these chickens get any bigger? He says, no, ma'am, they're dead. I want y'all to know that when I'm sharing with couples, I have learned the secret of a happy marriage, so I can share with them about how everybody can have a happy marriage. And you're lucky today, because if your spouse is here with you, I'm going to tell both of y'all how y'all can have a happy marriage. My wife and I, we found this out, and it's worked for us. And here's what we discovered. What we do is, we like to go out twice a week. And we go out, and we call that date night, and we go out, and we just go out and find a nice, secluded restaurant, nice restaurant with good food. We go to that there, take a nice leisurely drive there, order our food, enjoy that food, sit back, listen to some nice, relaxing music, and then take a nice leisurely drive home. And my wife and I, again, we do that twice a week. She goes on Tuesdays and I go on Fridays. So it's really works. Any golfers in the room? You might play golf. Oh, you got to be kidding. One golf. Two golfers. All right. Well, I can't believe it. Most of y'all are retirement age. I always thought y'all didn't play a little golf. Anybody play putt-putt? Pretty good. Well, anyway, I was out playing golf. You know, I like to do that every once in a while, and and I love to do that. And it was one Saturday, and I just had been waiting. The weather was starting to warm up, and I couldn't wait to get out there on the golf course. My wife said, "Well, you know, you better be back here by a certain time because we got to have dinner with some friends tonight, and I want you here on time." So I said, yeah, I'll be there. Well, I got off on the golf course, and I didn't want to pay no attention. And sure enough, it got late, and I was late, and I got there to the house, and she was ready to light into me. And I had to think up a story to tell her, so what I said was, I said, wait a minute now. I'm sorry I'm late, but you just wouldn't believe the bad day that I've had. She said, what kind of bad day did you have? I said, well, you know Harry, my friend. She said, yeah, I know Harry. Well, see, Harry and I were playing together, and we got there on the second tee, and Harry fell over and killed over dead with a heart attack. She said, oh, that's so terrible. You must have really had a hard day. I said, yeah, you wouldn't believe it. It was hit the ball and drag Harry. Hit the ball and drag Harry. Well, that one didn't help too much. But it reminded me of a friend of mine who, he and his wife like to play golf together, and they did that quite a lot. Go out playing. And one day they was out playing golf, and they got to about the 12th hole. And on that 12th hole, he hit it way off into the rough, and it actually went behind a barn that was sitting there and had to go to the golf course. Well, he decided he was just going to, hit around it, play safe, get it back up there on the green, take a couple of strokes. And his wife said, no, wait. She went over to that barn and she opened up the barn door. She said, you can make a shot right through here and you won't have to take those extra strokes. So what he did was he went okay, and he went back and he drove that ball, and it went through and it's kind of sliced off in the barn, and it started ricocheting all around, and it hit his wife in the head, and it killed her immediately. Fell over dead. Well, he felt so bad. He went home, and for weeks he was miserable. He couldn't believe it, and he just was, he didn't know if he could ever play golf again. And so finally he decided he had to face his demons. And so he had to get back out there on that golf course. And so what he did was he got back, went to the same golf course again, and now he's on that same 12th hole, and he slices again and goes off right behind that same barn. And he's there, and he's with the other three and his foursome were standing there, and one guy said, whoa, don't hit around there, and don't take those strokes. I'm going to open the doors to the barn. He says, don't do that. Something bad happened last time that I did that. No, I said, well, what could have happened? He said, I shot an 8. No, that was a new one. I can tell that one won't be back anymore. I know there's a lot of women folk in here. Y'all like to watch those, what I call, and I think most of the men folk in here call chick flicks. Every once in a while we'll watch them with you because we just want to keep the peace. And in all reality, we'd like to see something that has a lot of guns, a lot of shooting, and just a lot of action going on. But what we'll do every once in a while to keep the peace, we'll watch one movie. I did that one night with my wife. And in this movie, the heroine, she died. And so my wife is she's crying, going through about a box of tissues, and when it's over with, and I'm glad it's over with, but she turned to me, she says, Cletus, she said, if I were to die, would you get married again? I said, what? I said, I don't feel comfortable answering a question like that. But she was persistent. She said, no, really, if I were to die, would you get married again? I said, well, if you were to die, I am still young. Yeah, I guess I would. I said, so I don't like answering that. She said, well, if you got married again, she said, would y'all live here in this here house? I said, well, if you died, it would be paid for. Yeah, we would live here in this house. Well, would you let her eat off my fine china? And I said, well, I don't know why not. Well, she said, would you let her use my brand new golf clubs that you gave me for Christmas? I said, no, she's left-handed. I want y'all to know they got me in a whole lot of trouble, so I had to do something about that. So I did, and so what we did, we went over to Atlanta. I thought I'd take her out for a nice weekend. We went over there and we got us one of those rooms in one of those nice big old hotels. And it was really nice. And I took her out to a nice dinner after we had a nice day of going around. We went to that aquarium and we did some things. And I mean, it was really a good day. And then after we got back up to our room and we had a nice sleep. Well, we was tired after that long day and that big meal, so we decided we was just going to turn on the TV and watch a movie. That was me, by the way. And we was going to watch a movie. Well, it turned out it was a spy movie on there, on the TV. Well, that was more to my liking. And but unfortunately, in that there movie, because it was all about, spies and they were bugging things and all that, and so my wife got paranoid. And when the movie went off, she got too caught up in it. And she really thought somebody had bugged our room. And she said, Cletus, I know somebody's listening in on this or watching this right now. She said, you got to find it. I said, no. I said, okay. So I started looking and I did that. I mean, I'd go over, I'd lift this lamp up and I'd look under the lampshade. I unscrewed light bulbs. I did it all. I looked in the phone, took the receiver off the phone. I did about anything and everything that you can think of. And I finally said, are you satisfied? There are no bugs in this room. She said, well, you didn't look under that rug there. And sure enough, there was a rug under the coffee table. I had to move the coffee table. I lifted up the rug. And she said, look. And sure enough, there was this metal plate, round metal plate there on the floor. Well, she said, look in there. Well, I got out one of my screwdrivers, and I got down there and undid that thing. And I looked up under there. There wasn't nothing under there. And so finally, I just said, hey, there's nothing here. So finally she was satisfied. Well, the next morning we was checking out of that hotel. And that manager said, well, Mr. Lovejoy said, how was your stay here in our hotel? I said, well, it was great. We really had a great time. He said, did you have any problems? I said, no problems at all. He said, did you hear about the couple that was right under you? I said, no, what? He says, chandelier fell on him. Communication is sometimes a problem that we all have, and one of the things is I was in the store one day, and I was over there at Sears, and I was in the clothing part, and I looked at a shirt, and that shirt said shrink resistant. Well, I wanted to know, did that thing shrink or not? So I went up to the clerk there. She was a young girl, and I said, ma'am, I said, this shirt says it's shrink resistant. Now, does it shrink or does it not shrink? And I want y'all to know she was probably the most diplomatic sales clerk I've ever seen in my life. I mean, she was really, really good. She looked at that shirt and looked at that tag, and she said, sir, this shirt will shrink, but it don't want to. Oh, you laugh at that one, but you won't laugh that I shot it and my friend shot it at That's right, y'all don't play golf. Eight's not a good score. Okay. Y'all I don't make them lose my thought. Oh, I was went into a place the other day. It was really was a bar. I didn't go in there, but I just wanted to go in there and use the restroom. I was looking around, I saw a sign. It said, restroom, use the stairs. So I did. My court case comes up next Tuesday. I like to travel, and I did a lot of traveling growing up, and especially when I got right out of high school, me and a good friend of mine, we just decided we was going to go travel, and we went all the way down to the Southwest. We went down into Texas. We then went over to New Mexico, and so while we was down there in Mexico, we were looking around, and we saw a whole lot of sights. And so I was talking to a fellow one day, and he said, yeah, we was just the other day, we was over there seeing their cathedral over there in San Juan. Man said, it ain't San Juan. He said the J is silent. He said, how long you been down here anyway? I said, since you lie. We was down there and we was driving along and we was coming into a town and the sign said Mexia. And I said, look, we're coming into Mexia. And my buddy said, it ain't Mexia, it's pronounced Mahia. I said, that is Mexia. And he said, Mahia. And so we was arguing back and forth, and finally we came, first time I saw a little eating place, I said, we're going to go in there, we're going to settle this right off the bat. So we pulled up there, parked, went in there, and this young little girl behind the counter, and I walked up to her and I said, hey, I need you to settle this bet for a friend. Me and my buddy right here said, what I want you to do with the best enunciation and pronunciation and the best, and as precisely and as concisely as you know how, please tell us, where are we? She looked at me and she said, Dairy Queen. Oh, that, I caught that one. Yeah, later on, we came up to Dallas, and one day I decided I was just going to get a taxi, and I was going to go around and see the sights. And this taxi driver was taking me around, and we got conversing and all. And he finally asked me, he says, Cletus, do you like riddles? I said, yeah, I like riddles. He said, well, I got one for you. He said, it's not my brother, it's not my sister, but it's the son of my father. Who is it? I said, not my brother, not my sister, but the son of my father. I said, I don't know. He said, it's me. I said, wow, that's a good one. So I get back to Slap Out, and I'm with my buddies. I can't wait to tell this riddle. I said, got a riddle for y'all. It's not my brother, it's not my sister, but it's the son of my father. Who is it? They started thinking, Cletus, we don't know. I said, just a taxi driver in Dallas. I've done a lot of occupations in my time. One of the ones and things I got to preach a lot. One of the first places where I preached was a little old country church, and a Baptist church. And you know how they work. They have a little pulpit committee that goes out and finds you. Well, they wanted me to come and preach for them what they called the trial sermon. So I went there that Sunday, and I got up there and I preached for 5 minutes, and then I sat down. And when the worship service came to a close, they all came up, that pulpit committee. They rushed me back to the pastor's study, and they said, listen, Mr. Lovejoy, God is telling us that you are to be our pastor. And they were ecstatic. And so I said, okay. And so, yeah, all right. I think God's calling me here. So everything was good. Next Sunday, I got up there and I preached like I normally preach. I preached for 30 minutes. And then sat down, service came to a close. Everything was good. But that third Sunday that I was there, I got up there, and when I started preaching, I preached for 2 hours. And folks, I want y'all to know that that same pulpit committee, you just wouldn't believe it. When I got done, they couldn't wait to get up there. I mean, they rushed me back to my study, and they said, Cletus, what in the world is going on? Said 2 weeks ago you came and you preached for 5 minutes, and then last week you preached for 30 minutes. Today you preached for 2 hours. What is going on? We got to know. And I said, I am so sorry, folks. You know, that first Sunday I came in view of a call. You see, I had just gotten a new set of dentures, and my mouth was so sore that when I preached, that I couldn't do nothing more than talk for about 5 minutes. And I had to sit down. And then last week, I preached for 30 minutes. That is about average. That's normal for me. But let me apologize to y'all all over again. I am so sorry. You see, what happened this morning was the alarm clock didn't go off. And so my wife and I realized how late we were, and we were running around. And all the confusion and everything, I accidentally got her dentures by mistake. And when I started talking, I just couldn't stop. All right, I'll give y'all, one more. Well, we'll talk. I got a mentor, and he's an older pastor, and I asked him one day, I said, now what do I do, about people falling asleep when I'm preaching? I said, does that ever happen to you? And he said, well, it has happened in the past. He said, but this is what I did to discourage you. I said, well, okay, what is it? And he said, well, what I would do is if I was preaching, and I'm behind the pulpit, and I notice that somebody's back there starting to nod off, I'd just stand over to the side of the pulpit, and I'd go, folks, I spent some of the happiest years of my life in the arms of another man's wife. Let me tell you, you get their attention. I imagine you would. When I had their attention, I said, she was my mother. Well, I thought that was just great. Well, sure enough, the very next Sunday, I had an opportunity to try that. I was up there preaching, and I looked out there, and there was somebody nodding off. So I did just what he said. I went over to the side of that there pulpit, and I said, folks, I want you to know that I spent some of the happiest years of my life in the arms of another man's wife. Well, you ain't never seen nothing like it. I'm talking about heads popped up, eyes shot out. I mean, I got so nervous, I said, and I can't remember who she was. I want y'all to know y'all have been a great crowd. They're over in the New Testament there in the book of Galatians in chapter 5 verses 22 and 23. It says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. And kindness, I'll let that count. And kindness, there is no law. And I want y'all to know that gift, that fruit of the Spirit is one fruit. It ain't a bunch of fruits, it's one. And the Holy Spirit gives us this one fruit, it's all those things. I want y'all to know the first two there are love and joy. And you know what? If you got Jesus in your life, you got love and you got joy. Guess what? That's my last name. So you can remember that. You can remember that, and I want you to know it's the greatest thing of knowing Jesus. Greatest thing in the world. That love, that joy, that peace, that patience, all those things that He gives us. It's such a wonderful thing. But it's the love. His love. He loved us first. He loved us enough that He gave His only begotten Son to die for us. He died for me on the cross so that I could be forgiven my sins. He rose from the dead so that I could have eternal life and that you could. He did that for us. And you know what he gave us? He said, I give you a new commandment, Jesus said. He says, for you to love one another. So love, we got, and I just hope y'all do that. I hope when you think about me, you'll think about what Jesus has already done in your life, and you got that fruit of the Spirit right now, and that you are exercising, you are using that fruit. It's not a gift. You got it, it's fruit. It's what you got in your life. And the other thing is this. In the Old Testament, over there in Proverbs 17:22, one of the wisest men that ever lived, in fact, he was the king there of Israel. His name was Solomon. And he says something quite like this. He says, a cheerful disposition is good for your health. Gloom and doom will leave you bone tired. And that is so true. Laughter is the best medicine. And I caught you laughing today. So I know you can. So anyway, I just hope that you have a great day. I know y'all about to have a meal. And again, I'm thankful for the opportunity of coming and sharing with you. I'm going to turn this over to Brother Dickie there. And again, thank y'all for having me.
Thank you, Cletus, for coming to share with us. Don't forget your fish. You might want supper.
There'll be a bare wall at my house.